Welcome to this third episode now, really excited, of the piXL Drone Show. And today I'm with Haye again, our co-host from DroneXL. And we're talking drones. This is what we do every single week. But we're talking specifically about DJI drones. And we're going to be talking about the new drones that are in the lineup. DJI has a very busy next couple months coming up with a Air 2S. I'm sorry, I always get confused with these names. Air 2S and then a Mavic 3 Pro as well. And Haye has all the good stuff, so we're going to be talking in more details. And then Kara is going to join us after this, and we'll be continuing the discussion, talking a little bit more about other manufacturers that are coming up with cool drones and kind of where they fit in the lineup. You know, we know DJI kind of sets the pace for a lot of drones, and when they come up with a certain design, everybody seems to be following, but there's a few people in the industry right now that are designing something different, so we'll reach that. So Haye, good to see you again. What's the latest?
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, thank you for having me on the show again. Always a pleasure being here. The latest is that, let's back up a little bit. If we go back to March the 16th, that's the first time that we wrote about the DJI Air 2S, which is indeed a bit of a confusing name. The drone first showed up in an FCC filing. Every time that DJI launches a new drone, typically the FCC filing gets made public before the drone actually is officially announced or even available, and that always gives us a little bit of a sneak preview of what we can expect. Then, of course, we also have Osita LV, who's been a reliable source and leaker in the last couple of years, and he gave us some information saying that this drone would come out in a matter of weeks and that it would possibly carry the 1/1.7 inch Sony sensor, the IMX686, which would, this is rumored, be able to take 64 megapixel photos and shoot 4K video at a 60 frames per second, which would actually be quite the improvement, if you will. Since then, we've heard newer rumors that goes back to March 29th, if I'm not mistaken. And they indicate that maybe for the DJI Air 2S, we might even get a 1-inch sensor. Now, we don't know for sure if this is the case. However, if it were to have a 1-inch sensor, you can imagine, I mean, now we're getting really, really close to what the original DJI Mavic 2 Pro is able to do. A bigger sensor, obviously, is much better for low light performance. So taking video in low light conditions or photography, that sensor would help quite a bit. As of today, we don't know for sure if this is going to be the case, so take this with a grain of salt, this bit of information. What we do know, though, is that this drone is expected to have OcuSync 3.0, which is yet the next generation of the OcuSync video transmission system. The previous drones had 2.0. It's the DJI FPV drone. That's the first one that has 3.0. And again, here DJI has changed the naming convention, so they don't call it the OcuSync system anymore. Now it's simply called O3, which, as for the people that have been around a little longer, I guess we'll still refer to as OcuSync 3.0. The DJI Air 2S is also expected to have ADS-B in, which means that if you're flying and there's a helicopter or another manned aircraft in your vicinity, you're gonna get a warning in your DJI Fly app that tells you, hey, there's an aircraft in the area, so please be aware. In most cases, I would suggest probably landing your drone would be the smartest thing to do at that point. These warnings, based on my own experience, happen when those aircraft are still pretty far out. So It's a great system in that sense. You get enough of a heads up in order to get your drone safely to the ground, so you avoid any potential collision or incident with a manned aircraft, which of course you want to avoid at all cost.
And
that's great. That's expected.
And this is something that we saw, right, coming on the Mavic 2, the Mavic Air 2. That was the first time that we saw Air Sense. That's their technology. So far, it's been on the Mavic Air 2, and it has been on the DJI FPV. I think those are the only two drones so far that have that technology, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It was back in 2019 in Washington, D.C. that DJI had a special event where they first introduced DJI Air Sense, and they said that as of January 1st, 2020, all the new drones that weigh more than 250 grams. So this does not include the Mini 2, but any drone that's new, weighing more than 250 grams, would get the Air Sense technology on board. And back then, DJI said that this is something that we do since we recognize that the drone industry and the drone hobby is growing so fast that we want to make sure that we make these drones as safe as possible. And having a warning system that warns you for any manned aviation that's in your vicinity, of course, is a big improvement in that sense. Yeah.
Is there any other manufacturers that you know of that are doing this technology or working on it? Because I haven't really heard from anybody else.
No, me neither. I don't think in the drone world there's any other company that offers this technology as part of their safety features for a regular drone. I mean, if you look at a DJI Mavic Air 2, those drones really aren't all that expensive. So to have this kind of technology on board, I think is pretty impressive. Yep. It also goes to show that DJI is trying to be proactive and make the drone hobby as safe as possible, which I think, considering their size and the number of drones that are out there, is of course a very smart thing to do.
Yep, absolutely. And you, sorry, I cut you off on the Air Sense. What you were going to say something else about the drone?
No, actually, I think we covered most of it. I mean, like I said, at this point, there really isn't that much information available. I mean, we have the FCC filing that gives us a little bit about it shows the battery label, basically, and the location of the battery label. The battery is pretty much the exact same as it was before, so we're not expecting any major increases in flight time. If anything, it will probably be around the same, which I think for the DJI Mavic Air 2 was about 34 minutes or 33 minutes. Yep. So let's say well over half an hour, which I think for a drone in that price range and that size is pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. I would expect the DJI Air 2S to have similar flight performance. Potentially that one in sensor, but we don't know. That's not confirmed. That's only been rumored up to this point. If that's the case, then yeah, I think it kind of changes things within the DJI product lineup, because at that point you might wonder, like, why would I even worry about buying a DJI Mavic 2 Pro or Zoom at that point?
Yeah, I think the Air 2 put a big dent probably on the sales of the Mavic 2 Pro, because other than the sensor and the side sensors for picking up objects, other than that, that's really the big thing. Oh, well, of course, the change in aperture, to me as a photographer, videographer, changing the aperture is still a pretty big deal, but for most people it's not. Now let's talk about this naming convention, because DJI is making it as confusing as they possibly can. They started with the Mavic Pro was the first one that they came up with. So that was kind of the beginning of the Mavic series. And after this, they decided to add Mavic Mini and then the Mavic Air. I don't remember which one came first. I think the Air maybe came first, and then the Mini came after that. So all of this fell under the Mavic family. You had the Pro, you had the Mini, you had the Air. And then when it came up with the 2, it became a Mavic 2 Pro, Mavic 2 Zoom, and then they had the Mavic Air 2. It still is a Mavic, right? Technically. And when the Mini came out, the Mini 2 was no longer a Mavic. It's just a DJI Mini 2, right? And then now with the Air, the S, or the 2S, I guess, now we have an Air 2S. The Mavic is also gone from that labeling, which I think makes it extremely confusing for everyone involved.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I mean, we know that there's been a lot of changes within DJI. The company seems to be shifting more towards a Chinese-centric business model with less influences perhaps from the Western world, let's say Western Europe and North America. I've always understood that the name Mavic would stand for a very mobile, portable drone with collapsible arms. So a drone that you can fold, you can bring it in your backpack. Very, very distinctly different from the Phantom lineup. That was a more robust and a larger airframe, if you will. So I thought in that sense the name Mavic really meant something. And I think with the success of the original Mavic Pro, everybody knew what a Mavic would stand for, right? I mean, it's a very recognizable name. So to now see in the FCC filing the DJI Air 2S show up, which we assume is the successor of the DJI Mavic 2, of Mavic Air 2. You see, it gets confusing
I know
already.
it does.
Yeah, so it makes you wonder, like, if it is indeed a successor, and we're gonna see a drone with foldable arms or foldable legs again, so it's gonna look and feel like a Mavic, then why would you drop that name Mavic? And it's not the first product. I mean, we've seen it with the Osmo Pocket, that now is just the Pocket 2. We've seen it with the Osmo Mobile 4, which is now named the OM4. I'll go down the list. We have AccuSync 3.0, that's now O3. The Mavic Mini, now the Mini 2. The Mavic Air 2 is going to be the Air 2S. I don't know where they're going with this. The best comparison I can make is basically going back to the auto industry. If you look at BMW with their 3 Series, their 5 Series, and their 7 Series, which were the 3 versions that they had when I was growing up, and now they have a very confusing and complex naming convention for a whole range of different models of cars, and it creates a lot of confusion among people, because the benchmark cars that they knew and the models what they stood for, I think gives people somewhat of a structure, something to hold on to. If you're moving away from the name Mavic, and you're just calling it the Air 2S, then what does that mean? Is that still a foldable drone? Is that still considered to be a Mavic? Yes or no? If the Mavic 3 comes out, how are you going to call that drone? Is that going to be different? I think it creates a lot of confusion, and I'm not sure what the purpose is of changing these names. I think they might have been better off just keeping things the way they were.
Yeah, or started with the Pro Series and never calling it Mavic, or maybe the Mavic is the only one that's the Pro Series. Yeah, it's always been, and even when the 2 came out, I remember I kept seeing people saying the Mavic Pro 2. It was not really Mavic Pro 2. It was just a new lineup of Mavic 2, and then the Pro after that, and then the Zoom. So really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I think also with this one, the Air 2S coming out, if that drone, and we don't know for sure, but if that drone is going to have a 1-inch sensor, then what does that mean for the Mavic 2 Pro and the Phantom 4 Pro version 2? I mean, those drones, I think, will become pretty much obsolete, especially at a much higher price point. It's going to be hard to justify spending the additional money. But then if you go further up the range, then you get to the Inspire 2, and that drone is at this point also quite a bit older. I've heard from people within DJI that especially the camera technology on that drone is falling behind. So we have 3 drones that now basically get competition from below, from lower in the product range from DJI, and I think all 3 are very much due for replacements. And I'm not sure if we're going to see all 3 drones replaced. I mean, in the past we've heard that the Phantom line was dead, which raised a lot of eyebrows among people as well, because the Phantom stood for something. It's the iconic DJI drone. So if we're not going to see a Phantom 5, and we are going to see a Mavic 3, but the Mavic 3 is going to be substantially better than what we're now expecting to see in the Air 2S, then where does that leave the Inspire 3 whenever that drone is going to come out, right? I mean, it's just pushing things further and further along. So it's going to be very interesting to see, I think, what kind of products DJI is going to launch in the next year, 2 years from now.
Yeah, because historically, and this is not just DJI, this is all the manufacturers. You know, they start with a smaller sensor on a smaller lineup, and the more you pay, the bigger sensor you get, and the more you pay, the more front sensors, back sensors, side sensors you get. And we get to the point, like you said, with if the Air 2S has all of these things, or even the Mavic 3 Pro has all of these things, then where do you go next? I mean, I'm thinking of the sensor, the typical sensor size. So you have your Micro Four Third. Actually, the camera that I'm recording on right here, GH5S, has a Micro Four Third sensor, which is what I have on my Inspire 2 with my X5S camera. And then you have the APC sensor, and then you have a full frame sensor. And I mean, I guess there's another one in between that I'm not remembering right now. But yeah, where does that leave the next lineup? I mean, are we around the corner? And I know we don't have the answer, you don't have the answer, but are we around the corner of having an Inspire that has a full frame sensor that's affordable, where you have, you know, we talked about Sony before we started the show, where you have Sony that is building up a drone that can carry an A7 III or A7 IV, where you have a full frame sensor and you have all the controls in there. So this will be interesting to see what DJI is going to do with that.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because DJI in the past has been accused of dumping products in the US market to basically obliterate the competition. I think it goes even further. I mean, and I'm not saying anything about whether this is true, yes or no, I don't know. Actually predates my time in the drone industry. But my point being is that DJI is not afraid to battle the competition. They're not even afraid to battle their own product lineup, right? I mean, when the original Mavic Air 2 was introduced, you could argue that at that point in time was basically the best all-around drone at that price point that you could buy within the entire DJI product lineup. And if we're going to end up at a similar price point with yet a bigger sensor right now, then yeah, that's disruptive, not just even for the competition, but even for DJI's own product lineup. And for instance, if you compare that to some of those blue SUAS drones, that are targeted for the defense and government market and first responders and enterprise customers, those drones are so much more expensive. And you may rightfully wonder if those drones are actually able to do so much more than a very capable drone that you can already get with the Air 2, and soon it seems to be with the Air 2S. So DJI has been, I mean, they're not the biggest drone company for nothing, right? I mean, they've been very aggressive. They keep pushing the envelope. They introduce new technology all the time. And I wish we could talk and write about more and other drone companies as well. I mean, we always get called DJI fanboys. I wish that wasn't the case, but it's hard not to be a fan of them because they're pushing the envelope so much and they're coming up with all these new technologies at prices that are actually affordable for people. And I think that's still, it's impressive.
And fast. I mean, I remember when the Air 2 was just out, because we did our deep dive course for that. So I spent a couple of weeks just going over this entire drone. I feel like this was yesterday. And then now we're talking about the replacement for it. We haven't even had a replacement yet for the Mavic 2 Pro. And then now we're talking about a replacement with the 2S. Is it possible? Do you think? Can you think that maybe the Air 2S is not a replacement, and maybe it's a, you know how they have the Enterprise series? You know, Apple does that. Apple has their iPhone, whatever number it was, and then they had a smaller version, a cheaper version of it. I don't know where that fits in the lineup, but do you think it's a possibility that this might be happening?
Could be. I mean, I think in general, over the last couple of years, it always felt that DJI was looking at Apple in terms of their marketing and the way they present their products and the packaging and kind of the branding and image they want to portray. So it wouldn't surprise me if DJI was going to take a page out of Apple's marketing playbook, if you will. I'm still thinking that this is a successor to the DJI Mavic Air 2. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that's the most logical next step. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, to be doing that a year down the road from the introduction of the original Air 2 is really fast. We've seen that also with the Mavic Mini and now the Mini 2. DJI in that sense is they just keep cranking out new products, and it gets a lot of people excited. I think it also gets a lot of people very excited about what the Mavic 3 is then going to bring, because if the Air 2S is going to be this capable already at such a low price point, assuming it's going to be similarly priced to the Air 2, then what is the Mavic 3 going to bring? I mean, how much better can you make it, and at what price point is that gonna arrive?
So for me, I was actually talking about this in class this morning with my university students. To me, the next step is the new regulation obviously comes into play at one point. A new regulation for flying over people, a categorized drone, category, well, not 1 in this case, but category 2, possibly category 3 drone. The manufacturers have to be thinking about this. How are they going to market this? The new regulation is only for Part 107 pilots, so you can only fly over people with a categorized drone starting April 21. I'm doing my little speech right here because it's right around the corner and people are confused about this. So starting April 21st, which is in 20 days from the day we're recording this, you'll be able to fly over people if you have a category drone, which at the moment we don't have any on the market for category 2 and category 3. So in my head, I'm almost wondering, is DJI about to put out a category drone with a 2S, a Mavic 2, category 2, with a parachute with prop guards on it? And that's kind of an upgrade to that current drone. So I don't know. I'm making stuff up, but it's going to happen at one point.
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, in the past, I've heard Adam Lisberg and Brendan Schulman, both from DJI, talk about how when DJI started and they came out with those drones, the Phantom, and how they saw people in different industries take these drones and come up with use cases that these drones were never designed for and never meant to be used for, but people were still using these drones for different purposes. So think about roof inspections or wildlife surveys, all kinds of things that DJI never envisioned when they first launched these products. With the regulation changing so rapidly now, yes, it would not surprise me at all if DJI was going to launch a Mavic 3, but now is waiting to get more clarity on all these rules to come up with a drone that does not only fit the prosumer, but also is very capable for the enterprise market and for commercial drone operators or Part 107 pilots. And I think if you look at it that way, then yeah, you want to make sure that you come up with a drone that's going to be good on the day that you launch it, but also going to be valid for, let's say, the next 2, maybe even 3 years. Yep. So yes, that would not surprise me at all. I mean, if I've learned anything in the last couple of years covering DJI, is that they're very aggressive. They push the envelope in terms of technology, and it seems that they've been listening more and more to their customers and have a increased focus on the enterprise market. And this would fit right in there for them to wait and come up with the perfect product.
And we have Remote ID as well around the corner. And I'm sure for all the manufacturers, it's on their mind right now. Any drone that comes out, people might be reluctant to want to purchase it if it doesn't have Remote ID. You know, Remote ID, I know it's September 2023, but some people keep their drones for a certain period of time. So we do have the module option to put on top, but I think some people are going to be looking at Remote ID as a selling point or as a buying point when they buy a drone and make sure that it's available.
Yeah, and I think if you look at what DJI has done, take for instance the Phantom lineup, right? The Phantom 4. I mean, not only did they have a second generation in that specific model, the Phantom 4 2.0, but if you look at the enterprise versions, they basically extend the product lifecycle by just creating these dedicated versions for the enterprise market. And I think you've seen the same with the Mavic 2. If the Mavic 3 comes out, let's say it comes out this year still, or early 2022, you need a drone for the consumer market that's going to be a relevant drone, let's say, for 2 or 3 years. But for the enterprise market, you probably need to have another 1 or 2 years, maybe even 3 years, for that drone to be a relevant product. So yes, if you look at it that way, Remote ID I think becomes very important. And if I was DJI, I would definitely factor that in.
Yep. And I think DJI of all the manufacturers is probably the furthest in for Remote ID, because they've demonstrated they can do Remote ID by using their own technology. They even call it Remote ID in the app, which confuses a ton of people. So if you see that in your app, by the way, in DJI Go 4 and then in DJI Fly app, it's not Remote ID just yet, but eventually it will be. But they've demonstrated this. Were you... have you ever seen a demo of them doing this live of what DJI is doing?
They showed it in Canada. I wasn't there. Brendan Schulman showed it to me at CES last year, the year before. He gave me a quick demo of it, and he showed me that how you can use your phone and Remote ID the way DJI developed it to basically be able to scan the air and see what drones are in the vicinity. I think what you were referring to is already built into the app, where you can proactively use the DJI's version of Remote ID and say, hey, I'm Haye Kesteloo, I'm flying this and this drone, I'm on this and this mission, I'll be in the air here for the next 30 minutes, whatever. And then you can make that available. That, like you said, that's not the official FAA version of Remote ID at all, but it's I think an indication of DJI trying to be proactive and saying, okay, this is how this might work if we build it into our app.
Yep. Let's talk about Sony. Sony was in the news maybe a month ago now, 2 months, I don't remember. But they are coming with the Air Peak, which is their version of a combo between, I don't even know how you define this, between an Inspire 2 and a Matrice 600, sort of, which is going to be something that can carry an actual camera, an actual mirrorless camera, like a Sony Alpha. Yeah. I was excited when I saw this, but I'm not a Sony person. I'm actually a Panasonic person, so I fly with Panasonic. I record with Panasonic cameras all over my studio. I hope that Sony is thinking about this as not just a platform that can transport a Sony camera, but that you can actually plug in other things into it. What have you heard about this drone? Because we haven't talked about this together.
Yeah, if you go back to November last year, November 10th, 2020, I think is the first time we wrote about it, that Sony was going to announce the Air Peak drone for spring 2021, which basically is about now. That was the first mention of it. And then in January of this year, it was officially introduced as their new drone. I think it's super exciting on one hand because we know that Sony is able to make photo and video cameras that are very, very capable. So to get a manufacturer with that background and that technology to enter the drone market, I think is super exciting. However, Sony, as far as I know, has little or hardly any history basically in developing drones and making drones function well. And if you go back to, 2016, when GoPro launched their Karma, another company that had a great reputation in making action cameras, but then when it comes to making those cameras fly with the means of a drone, it kind of becomes a different ballgame. And this is, I think, the area where I have most of my question marks with Sony's. I don't know how capable Sony would be to come up with a drone that is as user-friendly and as capable as what people are now used to when they fly DJI drones, which basically anybody with a DJI drone, you open the box, you launch the drone, and pretty much anybody can fly it. And it's because DJI has polished the product to the nth degree, basically. I think it's super exciting that Sony is going to enter this market. I'll be very curious to see how well these drones fly. Yeah, they seem to be very serious. I mean, recently I haven't heard anything new from Sony, but if they make it happen and if this Air Peak drone is capable, then you might have a pretty phenomenal drone there because it's a much bigger drone, able to carry mirrorless cameras with interchangeable lenses. So in terms of videography, cinematography, photography, now you have a whole range of possibilities. And I think especially for people that already have Sony cameras, and maybe in that case you would only have to buy the drone, it might become a very attractive proposition.
So I've been trying to put a camera, GH5, even the S7 III, on a drone, and that's not actually an easy feat. If you look at the options out there that you have, so the Matrice 600 is what I've used. Matrice 600, you put a Ronin MX underneath it, and then you attach your Sony camera onto it. Here's the problem. Sony doesn't really talk really well with the Ronin, which means actually Kara is coming in and joining us. So I'm going to bring Kara in. So let's pick it up where I left off, Kara. So my experience was trying to put a mirrorless camera on a drone and be able to control everything on the drone, which is almost nearly impossible today without having an Inspire 2. I fly the Inspire 2 a lot, which I love because you can do dual camera operator. You have full control of the gimbal. You have full control of the drone in itself, which is awesome. But if I want to put this camera that's filming us right now or put a Sony camera, I have to go to a Matrice level. So I have a Matrice 600 with a Ronin MX underneath it. You put this camera on it. The Sony doesn't talk to the Ronin, which means that from the ground, I can't change anything. I can't start and stop my camera. I can't change my aperture. I can't change my settings. I can't do really anything. I can just hit record, take off, do my recording. I can get a visual of what's playing on the camera, but my experience is it's been extremely painful. Not only that, but now I don't have dual camera operator. So when I'm moving in one direction with the drone, then the drone is moving with it. And if I'm moving the gimbal in itself, which I can control, when the drone moves in a different location, it also moves the gimbal. Unlike the Inspire 2, when you do dual operator, you can basically fly the Inspire 2 in one location. If you turn to the left or to the right, the camera keeps pointing in the same direction, which is really important when you do a cinematography. So at this stage, to me, there is no really good solution unless I'm missing something somewhere to carry a mirrorless camera onto a drone and make it work just like an Inspire 2. So I fly the Inspire 2 instead, which is fine. But yeah, Kara, tell us.
Well, what I'm wondering is what happened with FreeFly's Astro drone.
Oh, I don't know.
So I wrote about that, I believe, back in December. And then about 2 days later, they introduced the Wave camera, and that was another big announcement. I am in touch with their PR, and the last I heard about a month ago, they hadn't released them yet. And I remember one comment I got on an article talked about how the legs didn't fold back up once the aircraft took off. You know, you had the You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're trying to do a 360 like the Inspire 2 allows you, wouldn't there be some interference in some sections? You might see the legs or the landing gear. It doesn't retract. So I don't know if FreeFly went back and made some corrections, but I looked at their website the other day and it looks like they still have the reserve in Astro button on there, the prompt to do that, but they don't have anything else. But I thought that was going to be the big thing. They also introduced it as being compatible with Sony's A7R4 camera. And I had interviewed Drew Armstrong, great guy. He gave me his wealth of knowledge. And he said the A7S III actually took higher quality video, and he was perplexed that FreeFly's Astro wasn't compatible yet. And I talked to someone at FreeFly, and they said, well, as Sony opens up their developers' tools to us, we can consider that as well. So now Sony's coming out with the Air Peak drone. And yeah, there isn't a lot of information out there about it right now, but from the looks of it, just the brief video that they shared and some introductory information, it does look like it's foldable, it's more compact, and it could fit into a backpack, which I think is huge.
Yeah.
I've tried lugging around an Inspire before. It's not fun. You got the hard shell case, and it takes up half of the back of my SUV's trunk, and very difficult to travel with. Yeah. So if we're talking about a drone where you can put any, and I know Sony's going to open it up to any of their cameras. I just covered their visual storyteller app for DP Review the other day, and they try to make any product compatible with as many cameras in their product line as possible. So if you can do that with a variety of those Sony cameras, I think it's going to be a game changer, definitely. And I can't personally wait for it to come out.
I hope they do open it up for other cameras. I was telling Haye earlier, because to me, not everybody is going to be flying Sony. Quite frankly, Sony and DJI have a pretty tough relationship, because if you have a gimbal from DJI and you try to put a Sony camera on it, half the things don't work. My Panasonic camera, I put it on an RS2 and I can control everything. The focus, I can change the aperture, I can start, stop, I can do everything I want. Very, very compatible. Sony's not so much. And that's been kind of my complaint about Sony with their camera. So I'm hoping that they can open up this thing a little bit. I think it's an API issue, quite frankly. They're not, or an SDK issue, I should say. And I'm hoping that they can open this up to other cameras. Man, I would buy this Air Peak the day that it comes out, if I can put my GH5 on it and I have all my lenses and I have all my equipment, and you can change any cameras that you want and load it up. That would be pretty awesome. Just like any gimbals, right? You buy a gimbal these days, you can put any camera on it. It's not specific to the manufacturer. So we'll see.
There's a lot of ifs there, right? I mean, as of yet, I think DJI is probably the only company that does both cameras, lenses, gimbals, and drones, and have everything pretty much combined in a way that it becomes seamless and easy to use. And we've seen other companies try and do that, and in my experience, a lot of them seem to fall short somewhere. I mean, FreeFly is a great company for sure. They come out with great products, but maybe they don't have the production capacity to bring out these drones in large enough numbers that people are interested in buying. I hope Sony, with Sony, you would think that it's a big enough company. They got deep pockets. They have a long history, of course, in cameras, electronics, consumer electronics, and whatnot. But still, to make a drone that flies and is easy to use, it's going to be interesting to see if they can pull that off. And this drone seems to me it's going to be far more of a high-end drone, priced much higher, more for dedicated cinematographers and videographers, and of course not so much aimed at the consumer market. But it's going to be interesting to see how well this drone performs, I think.
Wasn't there a price point for... No, not yet. Okay, I'm thinking of another drone.
Scant information. I mean, it was bare bones teaser material, which, it was enough to get people excited, but... Yeah, I mean, you really had to stretch, or not use your imagination, but just stretch out as much as possible to make it into an announcement article. Like Sony teased this 1-minute clip today, and it looks like this and that, and yeah, and it's spring now, so I mean, I'm hoping for maybe a late April, at least more information, if not a concrete release date. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet, but we'll see.
No, I'm optimistic.
Who else is out there with a drone that we're excited about that's not DJI?
Prism drone from Watts Innovations.
Yep, let's talk about that, because I've seen some videos of that, and I think John McBride from last week was talking about he was going to fly that drone. So Haye, tell us a little bit more about that drone.
Yeah, the first time we covered it was back in September last year. I mean, that's yet. I mean, if we're talking about an Inspire being a drone that's not easy to travel with, I mean, now we're getting into the drone size that is far more difficult to travel with. The Prism drone from Watts Innovations is a made in the US drone. It's substantial, it's large, it's more comparable, I think, to a Matrice, if not a 300, maybe even a 600. So it's a much more, large and complex drone, if you will. I haven't really heard anything recent about them, so I'm not quite sure what the latest news is on this particular model. But if you look at the Air Peak from Sony, and then you have FreeFly, and then you have Watts Innovations, I mean, there are drone companies out there pushing the envelope and coming up with exciting products. I think it's a matter of getting them in our hands and flying them and seeing what they actually are capable of doing, and it'd be very interesting to see that.
And that price point is also much different. Obviously, different market, completely different market. But he's been making waves, and I think it's a pretty small team that is working on that specific drone with a very specific niche market. But that's American made, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it will have some Chinese-made components. I think any electronic product that you put together is hard to do without anything coming from China. But yeah, it's the drone designed and built here in the United States, which I think is awesome. Something to support for sure.
What else is on the list of cool and exciting things coming up in the next couple of weeks? What are you guys, as journalists, you guys write about this? What are you excited about?
I'm excited about something. No, it's okay. Hey, I think we have a reason to really be excited these next 2 weeks. How about that?
What is that?
I think that's all I can. I think that's all I can say.
Oh, teasing us.
Teasing. I know. Hey, you know what though? I love what I do. I don't want to say anymore. But I don't know. I mean, could we talk about what we hope to see in the year?
Yeah,
I think so. I think.
Go ahead, Kara. We talked a little bit about this before you joined us, but tell us, what are you excited? What would you like to see coming up in terms of new tech?
Oh gosh, well, I think everyone knows this. It's not a secret, but I love the Phantom body. I love the way it holds up in strong winds. It's easy to catch, to hand catch. So if I'm on a boat, I could or a narrow space, or just somewhere where there isn't a lot of room, I can hand catch it and not a lot of room to land. I'd love to see a Phantom 5 with interchangeable lenses, or something with a zoom camera, or even a Phantom 5 zoom that can zoom in with a 1-inch sensor up to 4 to 8 times. I don't know, maybe I'm asking for too much, but that's the kind of tech I'm looking forward to. Yeah. But I could, and I want DJI to use their Hasselblad ownership more. And I know that's going to be for professional products and not consumer products, but I would like to see a lot more DJI products using that color profile, because I think especially for photographers, that's something that they really, want to use as well. So.
Yeah, Phantom 5 for sure would be interesting. I mean, Romeo, I think it was a year and a half or maybe 2 years ago by now, said that the Phantom lineup was dead and that we wouldn't see a new Phantom appear anytime soon, or ever for that matter. I would be excited about the Mavic 3, and I'm really curious what the Mavic 3 is gonna be able to do if the DJI at the same time keeps pushing the envelope. Going back to the FCC filings for the Air 2S, I mean, if the Air 2S is going to be such a capable drone at such a low price point, then what is the Mavic 3 going to bring us? And if the Mavic 3 is a professional or prosumer drone, is that going to give us interchangeable lenses already? I mean, I would hope so. I know a lot of people would be excited for that. But if that's the case, then yeah, what's going to happen to the Phantom lineup? What's going to happen to the Inspire lineup? And are those drones still relevant at that point? So we don't know yet.
Yeah, that's a valid point. I mean, there'll probably be a difference in like megapixels or I mean, think of what the Mavic 2 Pro offers right now. 1 inch CMOS sensor, 20 megapixels. Mm-hmm. You can only, so what would incentivize you to get a Mavic 3?
Yeah, more than 1
switch
inch.
out your Mavic 2 Pro for a Mavic 3. So I mean, you got to just think about it that way. Yeah.
Good zoom lens or interchangeable lenses would do it for me, I think.
Interchangeable. So my prediction is I don't think the Mavic will see an interchangeable lenses for a long time. I don't think that would cannibalize the rest of the lineup completely. So I think we're not going to be there. But I mean, for me personally, it's full frame sensor with interchangeable lenses. That to me would kind of do it. I love the Inspire. I love the X5S. I don't have an X7, but the X5S with even if it's a smaller sensor, a full frame sensor, but not that many pixels, I think that would kind of change things quite a bit.
So I see.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kara.
Go ahead.
I mean, when Air Peak comes out, I just think back to when the Mavic Pro was first introduced in September 2016, and that was 2 weeks after GoPro put out their Karma, right? So when Sony introduces their Air Peak, is DJI going to respond with something similar that's also more compact and can be folded down and could fit into a carry-on at best or backpack? I mean, that's what we got to think of, like how DJI reacts almost immediately to any real or perceived competition. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So do we see an Inspire 3? It wouldn't make sense to cannibalize their product line with a Mavic 3 with interchangeable lenses, but if they do end up coming out with a third rendition of that drone, it definitely they have to give us a reason. What I was going to mention too is with the Mini 2 and the first Mavic Air or the Mavic Air, I loved how DJI Flies app basically gave you just all these easy ways to create content, or just the app interface was just really intuitive. So it just gave you an easy way to create special effects that would normally take quite a bit of skill. So I want to know, it's going to be interesting to see if they use the Fly app to incorporate it into any future models.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Fly app, I'm kind of torn on the Fly app because I think it's missing some of the things from the Go4 app. I'm not quite sure the idea why DJI decided to have two apps. Why not have everything under the Go4 app? I don't know if you guys have more information about this, but to me it just makes things a little bit more confusing. Just keep it all under one app and then change. I don't know.
I spoke about this with Michael Oldenburg at the launch of the original Mavic Mini, and he said that the architecture and the software coding basically in the Go4 app became outdated, and it became really difficult to introduce new features and make that backwards compatible to older drone models that were also using that same software. So they started from scratch with the DJI Fly app. And they've been adding more and more features as the app matured, but also with the introduction of new drones. So I think we'll see a slow migration to the DJI Fly app, and I would suspect that the Go4 app is going to be faded out slowly over time.
Kind of like what they did with the Go app initially. When you flew the Inspire 1, you flew with the Go app, and then Go4, and then interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah,
I think DJI Fly's app is the future, but when it's used for drones that are professional or catered to more professional users compared to, say, people that buy the Mini or the Mavic Air. They're gonna definitely have to incorporate more features that that professionals rely on, for sure.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think what we'll see is probably that DJI will do that with the introduction of every next drone. I mean, if you look at it, the Fly app was introduced with the Mini, and then the Air 2. I mean, so if they're working their way up the model lineup, then let's say if the Mavic 3 comes out and they do use the DJI Fly app, I'm sure we would see new features in that app at that point, because the user base will pretty much demand that, just like you pointed out.
Mm-hmm. So I want to shift gears a little bit. We've got probably another 10 minutes of talk time. Well, I mean, we can go as long as we want, really, but keeping it around an hour. The first episode that we did, we were going to talk about the new regulation, but we didn't. And it's timely because this episode is going to go live on the day that the new FAA exam is going to hit the FAA website. So I do want to talk a little bit about this because I know a lot of people that are listening are probably confused about what is going on, and I want to make that a little bit of a PSA. So on Tuesday, which is when this is going to go live in the morning, when you listen to this, the FAA is releasing their online training, and their online training is going to allow you to do two things. It's going to allow you to get current with your certificate. So if you are at the point where you need to get current again, then you can take this exam. It's free. It's available online on faasafety.gov. And this is going to allow you to renew your certificate for another 24 calendar months. In the past, you had to take the UGR exam, which was $160. You had to do it in person. This you can do from home. You can do everything online. So that's great news. And the other thing that it does is it allows you to fly at night. And fly at night without a waiver starting on April 21st of this year. So if you take the training, and this is something I want to really emphasize on, if you take the training today, which is the day that we're going live on April 6th, you cannot fly at night without a waiver until April 21st. So make sure that you remember that part. And when you do this, you still need to have lights on your drone flying at night. I'm going to pitch in my video that I did a couple weeks ago on those strobe lights. Make sure that you have the right strobe light on your drone. And we tested 7 of them, and you can get the right one on our channel. But it's besides the point. So you have to do that training. You have to do this online training. If you're already certificated, you have to do this online training so that you can fly at night after April 21st. The last thing about this new regulation is there's a new exam. So for those of you that are listening that are not certificated just yet, the FAA is updating the exam and adding more content to it, including all the new regulation. So if you go and take your exam on or after April 6th, then you're going to have to make sure that you have all the knowledge necessary to pass these new questions on night operation, on operations over people, and then on night flying. I said that. Operation over people, night flying, and then the new renewal process. So you need to know all these things. Remote ID is not on the new exam. So you don't have to worry about remote ID just yet. It's not on the new exam. But don't head to the testing center without being ready for these things, because otherwise you're going to have a hard time. So I wanted to make sure I did this PSA. Are you guys going to do the online training?
Yeah.
Of course.
But you know what? But that being said, I renewed mine at the end of January because I got my initial back in January 2017, and I couldn't go a few months. I think I had 5 jobs lined up in February alone. So it just wasn't worth missing out on that income. But that being said, like Vic Moss points out, if you don't need to get in right away, just don't overlog the system, because there might be people that really need to, and we don't want to, just knock the power out on it with everyone rushing in. I'm
glad you mentioned that. Today, April 6th, only go on the website to do the training if you have to renew, if you have to get current with your certificate. Otherwise, wait until tomorrow and the day after. There's 220,000 remote pilots in the US. If everybody goes in, it's gonna destroy the system for sure. So wait a couple of days. I'm hoping some people actually don't know about this and then they figure it out in 10 days or so to get the training done. But I did the same thing, Kara. You renewed in January. I had to renew mine on March 10. I waited waited 10 days, and then the FAA said, oh, guess what? We're going to push everything. So I was like, well, I really have to do it. Yeah, because I had a bunch of flights to do as well. So, so I'm a month renewed.
I won't miss those testing centers. It's strange. I went into one that was completely packed, and you don't realize that there's like 20 different tests that are being administered. Mm-hmm. So I had one just specific question about it, and the guy looked at me. He's like, I have no idea, lady. Like, I'm just here to give you a pencil and a folder and, figure it out yourself. And it wasn't about the questions on the test specifically. It was just, I can't even remember, some miscellaneous question. But he looked at me like I was nuts. Like, I don't even know what test you're taking. I'm just here to clock you in and out, make sure,
Yep, just to practice.
You're not. Yeah.
Would be quite a coincidence, right? If nighttime operations are going to be allowed for Part 107 pilots, that maybe at that same time a drone with a larger sensor would come to the market.
Yep, that would be good timing. That would be a smart marketing person.
Rumors.
Well,
you're the king of rumors.
Yes.
Yeah, we try.
He's good at it. Yeah. Well, wait. No, but is DroneXL is your baby now, right? I mean, you get to.
DroneXL is my baby. Yeah, and we have people within DJI. We have people in China that pass information on. And the latest article we posted last week suggested that we might actually see the Air 2S with a 1-inch sensor. Now, again, we don't know for sure. It's not been confirmed. However, I would get pretty excited about the drone with a larger sensor at that price point for sure.
Yeah. I'm excited to be flying at night without a visual observer. To me, that was the biggest pinching factor, because I live close to the middle of nowhere. Prescott is a pretty small town, and we have a beautiful landscape all around town. And I do light painting. I love to use my drone to paint the rocks and to paint everything. And I take my camera on the ground to do pictures, but I always have to carry someone with me. I don't really have to. It's in the middle of nowhere. I'm flying at night. I'm flying at 50 feet. There's really no point from a safety standpoint in me having a visual observer. I'm no factor to anyone. So I'm kind of excited to be able to just lug my camera, my drone, and my backpack, and then go do some light painting in the middle of nowhere and get some cool shots. So that's what I'm excited about with this section. And of course, not having to pay $160 every 2 years, that's also a big plus. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's talk about flying over people for the last few minutes. If you have the ability to fly over people, what is the thing that you guys as pilots have not been able to do that you're excited that you may be able to do with the new regulation in terms of flying over people?
I mean, I guess it would be fun when it becomes possible again. Who knows how many years with the pandemic, but if and when they ever have a music festival again, I wouldn't feel comfortable flying over such a dense crowd maybe, but it'd be cool to fly around the perimeter at least and not worry about trouble. But even though some of these videos were illegal, when you saw some of the powerful footage from the protests, the George Floyd protests, I mean, there was one guy who in LA got in there and was flying over about 100,000 people packed into a street in downtown LA. And we saw this a few years ago with the Women's March in Austin, Texas. And of course, everyone was, look at that guy. He's flying over tens of thousands of people. And if his drone falls, he could kill somebody. And I mean, so I think it would be nice to be able to capture stuff like this and maybe not get such blowback. But the problem is, too, I also read a report of a woman who got a lash on her arm from an OTEL that fell out of the sky. Maybe the battery died, maybe because they were downtown in an urban area. Maybe his compass wasn't properly calibrated and he just, the drone decided to land and it hit someone. We don't know, but as someone who's trained for it, I think it would be exciting to get some of these moments, these historic moments, as long as you're doing it safely and responsibly.
I would agree. I mean, what was it? Portland, I think, where they were, where somebody was There's a local guy who runs a drone business in Portland. I forgot his name right now, but anyway, he was flying his drone to record the Black Lives Matters protests, and he was flying parallel with the protesting people, but he was keeping his drone over the buildings that were alongside that street, so he wasn't flying over the people, but at the same time he was able to record it. So that struck me at the time as a smart solution to the problem, basically, that you still get that footage that you're after, showing all these crowds, but you're flying in a way that doesn't create a hazard for anybody on the ground.
Yep. And make sure, if for those of you that are listening, if you plan to fly over people, that starts April 21st, but it's going to be very limited April 21st, unless Haye is going to tell us that there's a new category drone coming around the corner, category 2 or category 3. You're not really going to be able to do much. I have a drone that is category 1. It actually qualifies as category 1 that I'm going to be revealing very shortly, that I'll be able to use on April 21st to fly over people. So I'm pretty excited about this, but it's still going to be limited. So they are still, make sure you read the regulation, make sure you're educated as to what you can do. This is not a free for all. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden you can go flying over cars and you can go hovering over the interstate and all these things. Those are things you still can do. So make sure you find the right information. And well, I have that information on our website, but yeah, you need to do that.
Pilot Institute always has the most up-to-date and relevant.
There you go.
So
We do.
I remember when I discovered Greg and featured him in DP Review. That was an exciting moment because I said, finally, something that's thorough and accurate. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for joining us for this discussion. I think this was a really good discussion, actually, talking about all the different things all the different manufacturers are doing. So as always, you can catch the show on YouTube. You can actually find it on every podcast now. We've been approved with Apple finally. Took them a little while. So you can find us over there. And leave your comments down in YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, leave your comments. Love interacting with you guys. And we'll see you next week. We have a good guest lineup for next week. We're excited. And we'll be doing this every week with or without guests and talking about the latest going on in the drone world. So Haye, Kara, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week.